Well, 2024 was the year of elections. Wars and conflict, both new and old, raged around the world, from Lebanon to Ukraine and Haiti to Myanmar. And all of these can be hard to keep up with. So, as we've done in previous years, in this video we're going to go through and explain the world's ongoing wars. Who's the worst politician right now? Hear our thoughts and argue with us on our podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard. Find it on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. So to make things easier, we're going to go through these in roughly geographical order, beginning in the Americas with Mexico, where the country's drug war continues, with cartel violence, particularly in Sinaloa State, escalating since the Sinaloa cartel's leader, El Mayo, was arrested in the US in July. Mexico's election last year was sadly the country's most violent to date, with a record number of candidates assassinated in the run-up to the vote. 2025 will also be crucial for the direction of this conflict in Mexico, as some early signs show that new President Sheinbaum is taking a more aggressive approach. Plus, with the return of Donald Trump across the border, things could take a whole new direction, with some in the Trump Republican camp even floating direct US military action against the Mexican cartels. Meanwhile, Haiti continues to be plagued by worsening gang violence and a deep, long-running political and humanitarian crisis. Hundreds of Kenyan police officers were deployed to Haiti last year as part of a UN-approved security mission, which was extended for another year in October, but has struggled to make an impact amid personnel shortages and funding challenges. There have even been horrific reports of gang massacres, with the UN estimating that at least 5,300 people have been killed in Haiti since January, and more than 700,000 remain displaced. Down in South America, Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, has adjusted his total peace effort that seeks to negotiate peace with the country's main remaining armed groups, like the ELN and FARC dissidents. There have been some setbacks, not least the collapse of a ceasefire and talks between the government and ELN back in the summer. According to ACLED, the government has resorted to renewed military pressure on groups that disengage from negotiations, and is also leaning increasingly into regional-level peace talks. Moving across the Atlantic now to West Africa's Sahel region, where multiple interconnected insurgencies by Al-Qaeda and Islamic State affiliates persist, particularly in, but not limited to, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, three military-led states that quit the regional ECOWAS bloc this year, fueling further tensions in the region. The Central Sahel, comprising of these three countries, is now said to be the epicenter of the most violent extremism and extremism-related deaths worldwide. Nearby Nigeria is also continuing to face a resilient Boko Haram insurgency in its northeast. The trend of Western militaries being given the boot from the region continued in 2024, with Chad, Senegal, and the Ivory Coast ordering France to withdraw, and Niger kicking out the United States. Meanwhile, in Eastern Africa, Islamist insurgencies also persist, particularly in Somalia, but also in northern Mozambique. Meanwhile, Sudan's civil war continues to inflict misery on the country's population, fueling a massive humanitarian disaster and driving over 12 million people from their homes, according to UN reports. The fierce conflict pits the Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF, against the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, with fierce fighting first erupting back in 2023 and showing no signs of abating. The RSF in particular, but also the SAF, have been accused of carrying out widespread violations of human rights and crimes against humanity. At the same time, Ethiopia is still in the midst of a conflict centered in its northwest Amhara region, where the Ethiopian military is battling the Fano militia. Down in Africa's Great Lakes region, the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo remains racked by conflict. With more than 100 armed groups active in the region, the long-running conflict has created one of the most complex humanitarian crises in the world. The most active of these groups is the M23, which battles the Congolese army in the mineral-rich North Kivu province, with neighboring Rwanda accused of providing material support and boots on the ground. While in Europe, Ukraine will soon enter its fourth year of full-scale war with Russia, having faced a difficult 2024 that saw Russian advances 7 times greater than in 2023, according to the Institute for the Study of War. 2024 also brought about some dramatic changes to the war, not least Ukraine's surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk region and Russia's deployment of North Korean troops in Kursk with the aim of reclaiming control of the border region. US President Joe Biden announced a further $2.5 billion in security assistance for Ukraine before leaving office later this month, with Western aid remaining critical to Ukraine's ability to stabilize the front lines in 2025. However, the big question is what the incoming Trump administration's approach to the war will be, which could prove pivotal. Elsewhere, the Middle East saw one of the most intense years of conflicts for decades in 2024, according to ACLED. Israel, whose military was the world's third most operationally active last year, continued its war in Gaza, where more than 45,000 Palestinians are estimated to have been killed, as well as invading southern Lebanon in October, alongside a massive bombing campaign, where a tentative ceasefire is now in place. Israel's prosecution of its war in Gaza has also come under increasing scrutiny, with several international rights groups like Amnesty and the Human Rights Watch accusing Israel of committing genocidal acts, and the International Criminal Court issuing arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his ex-defense minister. But Israel also demonstrated its extensive capabilities. For example, its audacious pager attack in Lebanon, and has been able to wipe out much of the top leadership of Hamas and Hezbollah, with assassinations in Gaza, Lebanon, and even Iran. As we enter 2025, Israel warned of another Iran-backed group, Yemen's Houthis, that they would suffer a similar fate if they did not cease their missile and drone attacks on Israel. Meanwhile, Syria ended 2024 in a very different state to how it started. After more than 13 years of civil war and what felt like a stalemate, rebels launched a major offensive from Idlib in November that soon saw them march on the capital Damascus and overthrow President Bashar al-Assad, who fled to Moscow, as his Russian and Iranian allies were too preoccupied or unwilling to help him fight back. While Syria is now free from Assad rule for the first time in over 50 years, the country is not necessarily conflict-free. Control of Syria is still split between several groups. For example, the largely Kurdish-controlled east, parts of northern Syria along the Turkish border controlled by Turkey, and the Turkey-backed SNA, and the buffer zone in southern Syria seized by Israel since the fall of Assad. How these groups interact with each other and the new Syrian authorities will define Syria's path from here. And Syria may well end up being the site of a ramped-up Turkish offensive against Kurdish separatists that it's been battling for decades. And then there's Myanmar, which is still in a state of civil war, sparked by the February 2021 military coup. Since then, though, the military regime has lost control of vast swathes of the country to various rebel groups, and there's a lot of them, that mounted a major offensive in October 2023. In many ways, the conditions seem ripe for the collapse or defeat of the military, but some analysts see the rebels' momentum as slowing down, with a stalemate looking like the more likely outcome. Neighbouring China is also becoming increasingly concerned by the conflict and may seek to involve itself more deeply. China publicly backs the Myanmar military and has sought to pressure resistance groups along the border to stop fighting the military and join peace talks. All over the world then, people are vying for power and control, be that through civil war, international invasion, or drug wars. The question is then, who will come out on top? Who is the world's most influential person? That's what we're trying to find out with our official most influential person list, which we need your help with. So, if you want to help us decide on who the most influential person in the entire world is, then you can click the link in the description to cast your own ballot for your personal top 10, helping to shape the overall ranking. And your vote is super important, but voting closes on January 15th. So, do your democratic duty and cast your ballot for the world's most influential person. Also, if you're wondering why we're doing this, it's for the next issue of our magazine Too Long. That's because our next issue will contain the entire list, as well as fascinating articles about the top 25. Those won't just be boring profiles about each of the people either. There'll be interesting stories about who these people really are, where their power truly resides, and how they wield their influence. If you want to pre-order a copy of the magazine, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. Oh, and if you pick up a premium copy of the magazine, you'll also get access to our internal awards ceremony, where the team will first learn and react to your votes live. Plus, you'll also get to watch TLDR team members sit down to discuss their own personal lists, fight it out, and try and agree for once. You'll also get access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen, and get your name printed in the thank you section of the magazine. Anyway, to find out more, cast your vote, or order a copy, you can click the various links in the description.